Welcome back to the Cyber Resilience Brief, a Safe Breach podcast, where we cut through the noise to give you actionable insights on building true cyber resilience. I'm your host, Tova Devorin, and joining me is our resident expert and Safe Breach's senior sales engineer, Adrian Cully, who has deep insights into adversary emulation and simulation, as well as all things offensive security.
Hi, Tova. Great to be here. Always ready to dive in with the technical details and help our listeners understand the real threats out there.
And for that, we appreciate you. Thanks, Adrian. Today, we're going to be tackling a particularly urgent and impactful threat, the Warlock ransomware attacks, and their concerning association with a specific Chinese threat actor. This is not just another ransomware variant, it's part of a sophisticated campaign targeting critical infrastructure. Adrian, what can you tell us about Warlock?
So, Warlock ransomware first appeared on the scene just a few weeks ago in June of this year, advertised on various Russian cybercrime forums as a ransomware-as-a-Service or RAS operation. The RAS model is significant because it lowers the barrier to entry for threat actors or anybody who's got money. Essentially, the developers create the ransomware and affiliates pay to use it, pay to play, taking a cut of any successful ransom payments. This democratizes access to powerful tools for malicious actors.
Well, I guess this redefines the phrase honor among thieves. So it's not necessarily a single group developing and deploying this, but it's a service, just like any other legitimate service. From a technical standpoint, what would you say are its defining characteristics?
From what we've observed recently, Warlock is designed for maximum impact. Once deployed, its primary function is to encrypt files on compromised systems, rendering them inaccessible. The goal, of course, is to extort a cryptocurrency payment in exchange for the decryption key. While the specific encryption algorithms are standard for ransomware, what makes Warlock particularly dangerous is how it's being deployed in recent campaigns, which brings us to its association with a specific and highly capable threat actor.
Yes, I understand that we're talking about a Chinese threat actor, specifically identified by Microsoft as Storm-2603. Adrian, what can you tell us about Storm-2603, its background, and what it's doing with Warlock?
So Storm-2603 is suspected, a China-based suspected threat actor Microsoft has been tracking. They fall under Microsoft's Storm designation, which is used for newly discovered or developing clusters of threat activity, while other Typhoon groups from China, like Linen Typhoon and Violet Typhoon, recently associated with the SharePoint, focus on intellectual property theft and espionage. Storm 2603 appears to be more financially motivated with a clear focus on deploying ransomware. They've been observed using Warlock and in some past campaigns, even Lockbit ransomware.
So, what you're saying is that while the broader Chinese state sponsored activity is about long term strategic advantage, Storm 2603 is more about those immediate sales, albeit with potentially strategic implications because of their targeting of critical infrastructure.
Exactly. Even intelligence agencies need funding. Their recent campaigns have been particularly aggressive, leveraging critical vulnerabilities in on premises Microsoft SharePoint servers, as we discussed in a podcast last week. This is where the financial motivation meets high impact targeting. They've been actively exploiting vulnerabilities like CVE 2025 49706, a spoofing vulnerability, CVE 2025 49704, a remote code execution vulnerability. We've also seen them exploit related zero-day variants, such as CVE 2025 53770 and CVE 2025 53771, which are part of the currently labeled tool shell exploit chain.
So, they're not just buying ransomware, they're combining it with sophisticated initial access techniques.
Precisely, the combination is what makes them so effective and dangerous.
Let's break down their typical attack chain. Or for our listeners, understanding these tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs, is what's vital for building effective defenses. How does Storm 2603 typically operate to deploy Warlock ransomware?
So it's a multi-stage process, Tova, and it's highly methodical. If we walk through the 8 key steps, initial access is exploitation of public-facing applications. Most recent high-profile example of that is the on-premises SharePoint servers. Persistence is through web shells. Once they have access, most commonly deployed payload is spinstall0.aspx. The web shell allows them to maintain a persistent backdoor and execute commands remotely. They've also been observed creating scheduled tasks and modifying Internet Information Services components to launch suspicious .NET assemblies. further ensuring persistence. Step 3 is execution and command and scripting interpreter. The initial access is then used to conduct command execution, often via w3wp.exe process that supports SharePoint. They use command line utilities, command.exe and batch scripts. Step 4 is discovery. After gaining a foothold, they perform reconnaissance. They use commands like who am I to enumerate user context and validate privilege levels, mapping out the network. Step 5 is defense evasion, impairing defenses. A critical step is disabling security protections. We've talked before about many of our partners using the SafeBreach platform as a canary in the coal mine to detect tampering and evasion around defenses. Storm-2603 has been observed modifying Windows registry keys to turn off Microsoft Defender. This is a common tactic to ensure their malicious activities go undetected. Be careful about your anti-tamper mechanisms. If they're built into your security control, they're not going to be working if it's disabled or circumvented. Step 6 is credential access, credential dumping. They move to harvest credentials. They use tools like Mimikatz, often targeting LSAS, the Local Security Authority Subsystem Service, memory, and they're extracting credentials and keys from memory, which gives them the keys to the kingdom, basically. They can impersonate legitimate users. At this point, it's game over. Step 7 is lateral movement. They use tools like psexec and the unpack toolkit, executing commands via Windows Management Instrumentation, WMI, to spread their access across systems. And step 8 is impact, data encrypted for impact, group policy modification. When they get to their objective, Storm-2603 has been seen modifying group policy objects to distribute Warlock ransomware across the compromised environment. This allows for rapid and widespread encryption of files, leading sadly to significant operational disruption.
Wow, that is a highly specific, comprehensive, and chilling sequence of events. For our listeners who are on the front lines of defense, let's talk about the other side of TTPs, which is IOCs, indicators of compromise. What IOCs should our listeners be actively hunting for in their environments to detect Warlock ransomware and Storm 2603 activity?
Great question, Tova. This is where proactive threat hunting comes in. While specific file hashes can change, amongst the things that should be looked for are these behavioral and artifact-based IOCs. Malicious web shell files. We mentioned earlier the spinstall aspects, spinstall2 aspects in SharePoint directories, highly suspicious. Unusual process activity, especially w3wp.exe process. Registry modifications, that's exactly how they're disabling Microsoft Defender. Credential dumping artifacts, evidence of Mimikatz execution. Suspicious access to lsas.exe process memory. Lateral movement tools such as psexec or unpack toolkit use within your network, particularly if it's not part of your normal administrative activities. If you don't use these things as admin tools, nobody should be using them. Also monitor for unusual WMI activity. Network connections, any unexpected outbound connections from SharePoint servers or other internal systems to suspicious IP addresses or domains could be evidence of C2 and data exfiltration. Obviously, ransomware notes, if you get as far as finding a ransomware note, they've been successful, and finding files on your system have suddenly been encrypted. Many solutions out there place dummy files for early indication that somebody's encrypting data that shouldn't be encrypted.
Okay, so it's not just about looking for a known malware signature, but understanding the behavior and the tools these attackers are using.
Exactly. It's about shifting from a signature-based approach to a behavioral and TTP-based detection strategy. This is why continuous monitoring and robust logging are absolutely critical.
Even more than that, I would say, Adrian, that this threat, with its sophisticated TTPs and impact on critical systems, underscores the need for constant vigilance. How would you say that SafeReach's approach to adversary simulation and emulation help organizations defend against threats like Warlock and Storm 2603?
Tova, this is precisely what SafeBreach is designed for. We empower organizations to proactively validate their security posture continuously against these exact attack scenarios. We offer, amongst many others, SharePoint vulnerability validation. We can simulate the exploitation of SharePoint vulnerabilities, allowing you to confirm if your patches are truly effective and if your EDR or network controls will detect the initial breach and web shell deployment. This goes beyond just patching to validating the patch's effectiveness. Secondly, defense evasion testing. We can emulate Storm-2603's attempt to disable security controls like Microsoft Defender. This helps you understand if your endpoint protection is resilient to such tampering attempts and if your SIEM is alerting on these critical changes. Thirdly, credential access and lateral movement validation. We simulate mimikatz-like credential dumping and lateral movement using tools like PSExec and WMI. This allows you to see if your security controls can detect and prevent these post-exploitation activities, and if your logging provides sufficient visibility for incident response. Fourthly, we mentioned earlier, group policy object abuse simulation. Crucially, we can simulate the modification of group policy objects to distribute ransomware. This is a high-impact TTP, and validating your ability to detect and prevent unauthorized GPO changes is paramount. Point 5, lastly, continuous validation, the common denominator of all the emerging regulation and legislation. The key is continuous validation. Threat actors like Storm-2603 are constantly evolving. By continuously running these attack scenarios in your live environment against critical live production assets, SafeBreach helps you identify security gaps before an attacker exploits them. You get actionable insights to optimize your security tools, configurations, and processes, ensuring your defenses are truly resilient.
So ultimately, it's about moving from a reactive what if to a proactive we know when we're ready.
Precisely. In the face of sophisticated, financially motivated, state sponsored actors like Storm 2603 deploying ransomware like Warlock, knowing your true security posture continuously is highly valuable and continuously validating. It's the only way to stay ahead. It's about building that muscle memory for defense.
Adrian, thank you so much for that incredibly detailed and actionable brief. It's clear that understanding the adversary and continuously testing our defenses is non negotiable.
My pleasure, Tova. Stay safe out there, everyone.
The Cyber Resilience Brief is a SafeBreach podcast. It's produced by Tova Devorian and executive produced by Adrian Cully. Sound design provided by Adobe Podcasts. Distribution provided by Podbean and extra support and love from the SafeBreach team. For more information on how adversarial exposure validation through SafeBreach can protect you and your business, no matter where you reside or what industry you're in, please visit us at www.safebreach.com.